Hello. I just rewatched Gamer's Darkness Rising, and if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube for free. Please go and watch it. It's amazing. If you like tabletop role-playing games and indie movies, it's the best. That's my whole pitch. Enjoy. But it got me thinking, because not the main character. I don't think there is a main character, but also maybe the main character is Kevin. But the main character, Kevin, the GM in that film, is kind of running the campaign because he's hoping to be able to write a book and he can't figure out the plot, right? So he's asking his friends to play the game that he's created in the world that he wants to write this book in for the purpose of being able to write this book, right? And it got me wondering, as someone who writes books, if you haven't been here before, hi, I'm Will and I write books. All of the links you need to find them are in the description box below. If you like sort of fantasy, pirates, or sci-fi, you might enjoy some of my books. They're very centered around like queer and disabled characters. So yeah, blurbs available basically. But when it comes down to it, it got me thinking, as someone who writes books and plays tabletop role-playing games, could I write a book about one of my campaigns? Could I take the story that we played through in a tabletop role-playing game and turn it into a book narrative? And the answer is, well, maybe some people could, but I'm probably not going to. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that I just don't keep good enough notes for that. Another one is that I write very character-focused narratives, which would mean either I could only write campaigns that I GM'd, which are the ones I write the least notes for, or I could only do things from my character's perspective, which feels a little bit wonky because of stuff that we'll hopefully get into in a minute. And the third reason really is because the vast majority of my notes in D&D are like went here, met person, got this, did that. And like, I'm currently playing a cleric whose main role is, obviously as with many clerics, but not all, whose main role is making sure my party members do not die, although I was the first one to nearly die, so but making sure my party members do not die. So I also keep track of like hit points and that kind of thing, so that I can keep an eye on them and I can heal the people who need the most healing. But the other thing that is largely my notes for D&D is funny quotes that we've said. Like the funniest things that we've said go in the back of my notes, so that at the end of the campaign we can relive all those funny, hilarious memories, which obviously it's not very conductive to, I mean, it would make for a very funny book, but and like, I know that some people would do it by like recording the sessions and stuff like that, but I couldn't ever write, I don't think, one of my campaigns into a novel. But I do write character backstories. If you want to read those, I share them completely free on nobudos.wordpress.com. My most recent ones are my character from my current campaign, Heroes or Villains. Skulleth is their name. I have 3 pieces of backstory for Skulleth. The basic premise of Skulleth is that they are a cleric of a war deity, war and thunder deity. They didn't really want to be a cleric, but their half-orcish family has expectations depending on birth order. So there's the heir, the spare, the one who goes to the cloister and signs up to be a cleric or a paladin, and then the next one goes into the military, and then after that you're kind of free to do what you want, which is very much based on like regency expectations. But they're also half-orcs in the wilderness and they live nomadic lives. It's a fun time. But yeah, Skulleth didn't really want to do that. Skulleth's really big passion is taking care of people. So they have ended up becoming a healing cleric, where their bargain with the deity that they have sworn themselves to is that if they save people mid-battle, these people can go on to fight further in the name of this deity. But I've also done my wife's character's backstory. So Vilzenia is a warlock, but she wasn't like supposed to be, like internal character logic. She wasn't supposed to be. Obviously, my wife made her a warlock on purpose. And basically it's the thing of how she ended up giving up her life goals to become a warlock in the first place, which is a lot of fun. And obviously with character backstories, you can be really internally focused on the character themselves rather than like all of the characters. You can make them, they are the protagonist of their own backstory in a way that they kind of can't be of the main campaign itself. And as someone who writes really character-focused narratives, I would find it very, very difficult to subsequently create a narrative based in the world and story that we're all building together. Currently there are 6 of us, including the GM. So obviously, if you are better at like the omniscient narrator kind of vibe, then that would be easier. But as someone who writes really character-focused narratives, it's not necessarily possible for me to do, because I can't get into the other characters' heads because they're not played by me; they're played by other people. And I think therein lies a big part of the potential for trouble if you're trying to write a D&D or tabletop role-playing campaign as a book narrative. The other really big problem that I see is, or I foresee as it were, is that the medium is so different, the translation would be quite difficult. So like, you see this a lot with like video games getting turned into movies as well. Like, think about video games getting turned into movies or TV series, and then think about how many of those are badly done compared to how many of those are well done, right? Like, I like the Lara Croft movies. I like the Lara Croft games. I do not think they align very well with each other. Like, I don't think it's a good adaptation just because I think it's a fun movie that I like. The Assassin's Creed movie as well is kind of the same. Like, I like the Assassin's Creed games well enough. They're not really my jam, but I don't hate them. Sorry to any real Assassin's Creed fans here. It's just not for me. My brother really likes them. Anyway, but like, obviously the Assassin's Creed film was kind of weird by comparison. Like, if you divorce it completely from its origins, it's not a horrible movie. And at the same time, it doesn't do a brilliant job of being Assassin's Creed. And therein lies a lot of the problem here as well, with the idea of turning a tabletop role-playing campaign into a book-style narrative, is that no matter what else, that translation is always difficult and muddy. Even if you're really great at the omniscient narrator thing, even if you've kept really detailed notes, even if you've done all the work, that translation is still difficult and still muddy. And it's very, very hard to get it right. And I think for me, a large part of that fundamentally comes down to the same problem that a lot of movies based on video games have, which is the player is such a huge part of it, right? Like, when you're playing Assassin's Creed, even though you're playing as the character, you are also not... You are making choices based on your own value set, based on your own thought process. Like, you're playing the game, you're following the quests, but ultimately you're the one playing it, so you can make the character react how you want to a certain extent. And like, even more so for more personalizable games like the Dragon Age games or the Mass Effect games or stuff like that. But like, even in something like Horizon, which is one of my favorite games of the moment, even something like Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, when you're playing as Aloy, you get to pick whether she is an emotional Aloy or a logical Aloy or a forceful Aloy. And those decisions don't have a huge, gigantic amount of impact on the actual gameplay. You're still playing the same game. But it allows you, the player, to feel more connected with the character in a way that there then is more distance from the movie version of the character, because you don't get to make them move and you don't get to make them make choices. Even if you always have to make the same choices, you're not the one doing it, and therefore it's different. And that translation is where things get muddy. And it's the same sort of thing if you're trying to translate a tabletop role-playing campaign into a book. And I think for me, another big part of it is that thing of, ultimately, as a cooperative medium, which is what tabletop role-playing games are. They're a cooperative medium. All the players, no one's the protagonist. You're all just players. You're all characters playing out on the sound stage that your GM has created for you. And your GM probably has some kind of plot. They have a big bad that you're working towards, in all likelihood. They probably made it in advance of the session that you got to. Sometimes when they're quite new at it, maybe they have sort of a vague idea and they're just letting you go where you like. And then when I was running my first ever campaign, I'll be honest, I'm being really like I'm acting as if like nobody understands that this is me. We all know this is me. I don't outline things, so it was actually quite difficult doing my first tabletop role playing campaign as a GM because I didn't know where we were going. Like I knew where we were going. I had come up with this worldscape, and in the worldscape I'd come up with, it was the human kingdom and the elven kingdom were at war because that's an easy conflict to throw in there. And that's a thing. They were at war. It meant that anyone who was playing as an elf was going to be hated by the humans. Anyone who was playing as a human was going to be hated by the elves. But the elves and the humans were trying to come to an accord. So there was all this hatred still, but they were trying to make a peace treaty, right? And that was the worldscape. And that was all I had. I had my characters waking up in a dungeon, not remembering anything that came before. And as they investigated, they found out that there was this peace treaty. There's been this thousands of years of war. Nobody really knows why. And then when they got to the end of the map that I designed and the part of the campaign I designed, I was literally just really upfront with them. I was just there like, guys, I don't have any more right now. You can go to these 3 places from here. Where do you want to go? Let me build it for you. And I always had like at least 2 or 3 hours worth of campaign before I stopped and asked them where they wanted to go and made them go away, and I could create the next map and the next piece of the campaign. But I didn't really come to any conclusions straight off the bat. I didn't have a big bad in mind when I started the campaign. I very much had the like, this is the world. What do you guys want to do? And to be fair, that is how I write books. So like, I mean, not so much what do you guys want to do? It's very much like, okay, what would my character do in this situation? And I let the characters do the guiding in my tabletop role-playing campaign the same way that I do in my books. And I still could not possibly write that campaign up into a book narrative because it's too chaotic. And it's kind of impossible to go back and edit it into something more cohesive. I mean, I did end up putting in quite a lot of foreshadowing very well, the same way that I do with a lot of my books. Like, I will obviously go back and add more foreshadowing or clarify foreshadowing once I finish the book and I know what the ending is. But like, if you look at, for example, the Guardian Cadet series, because that is a book series that I wrote book 1 and then book 2, and I'd published book 1 before I started writing book 2. And I realised there is actually quite a lot of foreshadowing in book 1 for book 2. So like, that's pretty good. Because I must have some idea of where I'm going, even if I don't consciously know that that's where we're going, because otherwise we'd never get there. But when it comes to the idea of trying to write up that campaign, even if I could go back and add more decent foreshadowing in, because I was very much planning to play it at the characters, my players' decision making. Like, they could go where they wanted, they could do what they wanted, they could shape the story into something that matched with what they wanted to play, and that was how I wanted to run my campaign. That does not make for a great and logical narrative that would be appreciated in something like a book where you're not actively shaping the story. So either I would have to go back in and make a lot of big changes, or I'm just not going to do it. And let's be honest, I'm just not going to do it. But then even if you're looking at it from the player side, like my current campaign that I'm running with Skulleth and Vilsenia, I'm not running it, playing with Skulleth and Vilsenia, the GM obviously has a plan. There is a world and there is a story that we are holding to. And it's quite linear in a lot of ways. Like, we have options, yes, but most of those options are pointing us towards the same goal. It's basically like we're being herded in, but we can go into paddock A or paddock B, ultimately, or rather we can go through gate A or gate B, but ultimately we're going into the paddock either way. Which I don't think is bad. I'm not trying to say that at all. I'm very much enjoying myself. I think it's a great campaign. What I am saying is that obviously because that has a more structured expectation, unlike when my friend who made my website ran a campaign where it was a short campaign where we were just trying to figure out what was going on in this strange little village that we'd approached. And it turned out to be a human sacrifice ring. But we went into this little village, something was off, we started investigating, and like that obviously had a very, very, very structured story. Honestly, that's probably would be the like easiest one to translate into a book narrative, except for the fact that the characters are fucking nuts, man. Like, I was playing, because I don't play normal characters, I was playing a tabaxi bard who plays the bongos. And like, when you have that as a character, fundamentally, I think it's a little bit weird to turn it into a book. And I'm just trying to have fun with these things. Like, I'm not trying to make like super serious characters. That's not my jam. I love making like characters that don't make sense, like characters whose interests don't necessarily align with their backstory and don't necessarily align with their like species expectations, which is kind of being gutted by the new 2024 rulebook as far as I can tell, which is kind of sad for me because I love the clash of that, and I really enjoy making characters who have these like conflicting pieces of themselves. And the 2024 rulebook is trying to make things easier for people like me, but by doing that, it is making it less fun to build these kinds of characters, because like, who's going to play a half-orc bard? Me. I'm going to play a half-orc bard. My best character that I have ever made is called Heim with Us. Yeah. Hi. Haey. Hi. Hi. Favorite character I've ever played. Best character I've ever made. Hai is a bard. Hai has a size-changing cat, and Hai was raised by tieflings in a circus, right? Weird character. Love him to pieces. And the thing with Hai is that they're really great, but every single interaction is a pun in itself because their name is Hai. And I love them so much. But you couldn't, like, well, you could absolutely make a character like Hai now, but it wouldn't be weird anymore. Like, in the 2024 rulebook, as far as I can tell, no one's looking twice at a half-orc bard. No one's having a half-orc bard come into the tavern and be there like, hello, I would like to perform for you. In return, can you please have me and my companions, give me and my companions meal and board? No one's sort of looking at that half-orc bard now and going, perform first, and then we'll discuss it. And then watching them do like an acrobatics and like acro ribbons routine and going, oh wow, okay, no, this is entertaining. Yeah, sure. If you would like to read some of Hai's shenanigans, you can read the Tale of the Shadow Rogue, because the Tale of the Shadow Rogue is basically Hai doesn't want to admit that they don't want stories getting back to their parents, that they have been doing these adventures and getting themselves into trouble. So they came up with this fictional character, the Shadow Rogue, which is just Hai, but when they tell the stories, it's about the Shadow Rogue, and I follow him around, and them, I can't remember what pronouns I used. But basically, Hai follows the Shadow Rogue around and tells the stories, but it's just Hai getting into trouble. It's a lot of fun. I think, but you can't necessarily build characters like that anymore in the same way that I did. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I think I've completely lost my train of thought on that, so we're just going to abruptly end that section and say the next part, which is I think that when it comes to playing tabletop role-playing games with the cooperative element, there is this fundamental base that I reckon all players are playing under, this fundamental ruling that everybody who comes to the table in a cooperative mentality is playing by, and that is fundamentally, we all want to play the game, right? That's the goal here. The goal of sitting down to play tabletop role-playing games is to sit down and play tabletop role-playing games. And fundamentally, at its base, if your character wouldn't agree to to do this or wouldn't agree to stick around or wouldn't continue with this mission, you then as the player have to decide whether you are actually going to have your character leave and have to come up with a new character to introduce that fits the story better or fits the other players better or whatever, things like that, or whether you are going to change your character to fit this narrative better and give them a reason to stay, or whether you're going to give them some kind of continuing character arc reason for them to stay, or whether you're just going to have them stay because you don't want to end the campaign and you don't want to make a fuss and you don't want to build a new character. So they're just sticking around because, well, for the plot, I guess. And like, I've had this a couple of times now, probably because I make weird characters, but like, I am going to preface this next section by saying that I'm very much enjoying my campaign, and GM, if you are watching this, you're not doing anything wrong and this is not a complaint. And other players, if you're watching this, you're not doing anything wrong and this is not a complaint. I know that with my current character, Sculleth, in my current campaign, Heroes or Villains, they would have left by now. Sculleth is fundamentally a loner. They spend the vast majority of their time alone since they ran away from the cloister. Again, you can read the short story backstories if you want to. Start with running, not stupid. But basically, they ran away from their cloister. They ran away from the place that they were training to be a cleric. And the place that they were supposed to spend the rest of their life being a cleric. To follow their own heart and their own, like, passions. And so fundamentally that's the base, that's the backstory, that is the base of all of Sculleth's character, is that no matter what else, they will always be true to themselves. They will follow their passion, they will keep people safe, they will heal people up. That is their goal in life, is to make people feel better, to make people feel good and happy and healthy and whole. And that doesn't align with a lot of what the other players are doing and a lot of the world that we're playing within. And obviously this is just a personal clash. Like, nobody's doing anything wrong. I haven't made a bad character. The GM hasn't made a bad world. Nobody else has made a bad character. Nobody's making like bad decisions. It's just one of those moments where things haven't matched up quite right. And obviously, again, I can change Sculleth's character to make it make sense that they're sticking around. Or I can give, like, a sort of plot adjacent reason for them to stick around. And to be fair, I have done that. I gave them a plot adjacent reason to join the campaign in the first place. The reason that Sculleth joined the campaign in the first place is because they heard that their brother Kier, because they have 12 siblings, they heard that their brother Kier might be in the area, and the area is absolutely devastated. It's an end of the world zombies situation. And obviously Sculleth is worried that something is going to have happened to Kier. And they want to check in and they want to make sure he's okay. Because it's their brother. Of course they do. So that's the reason they joined the campaign, and that is what I am clinging with white knuckles to. As why they're still hanging out with the people that they're hanging out with, even if those people's values don't align with Sculleth's. Because obviously they're happy alone, as proven by the fact that they've spent most of their life alone. They ran away from the cloister, they can't go back home, they have to spend most of their time on their own, roam in the countryside, healing people up in the name of their deity. But like, so there's no reason for them to stay for the purpose of like socialization or something like that. They could just leave. But if they leave, I don't have a character anymore. And I don't want to make a new character. So they're just hanging around, hoping that we'll get back to looking for Kier. Because we don't know where he is anymore. We kind of lost track of him. And I don't know whether that's because the GM's actively lost track of him, or whether that's because the other players want to go to this thing or that thing or the other thing instead, or what. But ultimately, we've kind of lost track of Kier. And there was like a half-orc band roaming around as well that have also seemingly disappeared. And that is what Hai kind of cares about. So not high, wrong Hartford. That's what Scullith kind of cares about. So, like, most of why they're staying is convoluted and semi-nonsensical for the plot reasons. They're sticking around. It's not even for the plot. They're sticking around because I want to play the game and I want to play as Scullith, and I have to make that work. And the thing is that doesn't work in a book narrative. Is where I'm going with this. That doesn't work in a book narrative. You can't have a character hanging around because in the game they just didn't leave because the player didn't want to stop playing the game. So you either then have to make the decision, the executive decision for the player when you're writing it as a book, that, hey, you've decided that they're going to stay for a different reason, or you have them hanging around because no reason, which isn't a great way of doing a book because it's likely to raise questions with your reader. And the thing is you've got to be really careful with books. When you're writing a book, you have to be quite careful that you are actually only raising the questions you want to raise with the reader and not accidentally raising a bunch of other questions that then cause them to start picking holes in your narrative, right? So what do I mean? I mean, like, nobody wants you, like, you see it, obviously, I've talked about the contract between the reader and the author before, about how the reader comes in voluntarily suspending their disbelief. They're not here specifically to pick holes in the narrative, but at the same time, you, the author, have to provide a well-crafted narrative and a well-crafted world that doesn't encourage them to ask those questions. I can't remember what I called that video, but I did make a video about that. And it's that's so relevant here because that's one of those things. You as the writer have this contract with the reader that you're going to make it as easy as possible for them to suspend their disbelief. And if you are raising the question of why is Scullith still here, that can destroy an entire narrative. Because why is Scullith still here? Why would they still be there? And then you remember that this is a tabletop role-playing campaign turned into a book, and you think, they're just here because the player was there, aren't they? They're not actually relevant. They're not actually, like, helpful. I mean, they're very helpful because they keep everyone alive because they're a cleric. But like, you can do whatever you want. But it's not a fun, enjoyable book if your characters are only there because they serve the plot in some way. Which, if you've never tried to write a book, sounds completely ridiculous. Because obviously all characters are there to serve the plot in some way. Otherwise they get cut. Sad face to Ember from Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, who was a friend of Leor that got cut. Leor had another friend. The friend was called Ember. Ember got cut because she did not serve the narrative. She was not helpful. She was not necessary. Sorry, Ember, you're cut. Everything that Ember did could be done better by a different character, and ended up mostly being put to Kitty and Gregorio instead, which made both Kitty and Gregorio much, much better and more rounded characters. Wonderful. Sorry, Ember, and sorry, Leor, because now you only have one friend. But that's just how it works sometimes. And it's that, like, in a narrative version of this campaign, Scullith is useful in the half-orc section when they're actively looking for Kira. And then if I was writing it as a book, they would probably have left at the end of that. Because from there, the other players wanted to go into the Undercity that had been rediscovered. And the thing is there's no reason for Scullith to want to go there. They haven't bonded with these people very much. Again, no fault of any of the players. It's just that everybody's very focused on saving the world. But they're also doing it in a way that doesn't align with Scullith's morality. So Scullith's main goal is finding Kier, so they would split off and go looking for Kier, right? Unless there is a specific reason for them to stay with the group. And the thing is there isn't. So I would either, if I was trying to make this campaign into a book, I would either have to come up with a reason, and like obviously Scullith is my character, so I can do that. But like, if this happened to another character, or if another member of the party wanted to write the book, they would have to come up with a reason. And that is also a lot of the trouble. It's like, obviously get permission from your table before you start writing a book out of their adventures. But like, I got permission from people to share the funny quotes online. But you would also then need to either talk to the player about what their character's logic is for sticking around, or you would have to make an executive authorial decision about it, which can be uncomfortable because potentially it's not your character, or potentially it's not your world. And obviously there's a certain amount of permission that goes with, yeah, of course you can turn it into a book. And there's also a certain amount of like control that one wants to exert over one's own character. Like, I would kind of hate it if somebody took Scylla and put them in as a book character and then made an executive decision about why they were sticking with the party that wasn't the decision that I kind of tried to make and that I kind of tried to make logical within the universe, within the story, within the character that I had designed. And I know, obviously, I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who writes books for a living, but I do think that there is a lot of challenge to be found there, and there's a lot of potential for upsetting the other people at your table. And like, especially if you're playing with friends, I don't think that's a nice thing to do. I don't think that's something that you necessarily want to do. And like, obviously, again, coming at this from the perspective of the only writer in the group, I am the only one who writes in that entire group. As far as I know, no one else has ever talked about writing anything, let alone books, right? I've got a website designer, I've got 3 archaeologists, and I actually don't know what he does for a living. I've never asked. It's very much the thing of like, the 3 archaeologists met on an archaeological site and became friends, and then the other 3 of us are the partners. And like, we're all friends now, but like, but yeah, so like, none of them have ever expressed to me any interest in writing these things up, and that's fine. That's, again, like, not everybody wants to write things. It's just because it's my passion. I've never been an archaeologist. That's not something I want to do. But I play campaigns with 3 archaeologists. So anyway, like, I'm just making it clear that it's not a judgment. But these people don't want to write books, so I don't have to worry about it. But no, these people don't want to write books. But from like an author perspective, it's very much the thing of like, I have lost my train of thought again. Oh my gosh. From an author perspective, it's very much the thing of like, if I did ask someone else what their narrative reasoning was, what their character's narrative reasoning was, I don't know that I would be able to get an answer from them anyway. Like, again, not in a mean or judgy way, but if I'm trying to translate this, go through that muddy translation of turning it from a cooperative campaign to a narrative that would fit into a book, that translation can be very difficult. And if I'm there like, oh, hey, wife, that's a bad example actually, because she helps me a lot with my books. Oh, hey, website designing friend. I don't want to use people's names. Hey, website designing friend. What is your character's logic behind this? And how would I fit that into the narrative that I'm crafting? I don't think, no offense, he would be able to answer that question, because the thing is that takes a certain amount of like story creation knowledge, character creation knowledge, book writing knowledge, and all of these different things aren't necessarily things that someone will come to a tabletop role-playing campaign table with, right? Like, obviously they're building their characters. Absolutely, they know how to build a tabletop role-playing game character, but a tabletop role-playing game character is not a book character. There's a translation there. And if you don't speak book, you might not be able to, well, you wouldn't necessarily be able to translate them into a book version. You wouldn't necessarily be able to give a reason, a logic, a thought process that would fit into a book narrative. And that is what it is, right? But it makes it even more difficult because obviously I, as an author, do not want to take my friends' characters and be there like, I'm going to shove them into the mold that I think they fit in, and have my friend be upset that I've made their character into something so alien from what they created in the first place. And also, I don't know that I would be able to go and ask my friend, hey, could you help me fit this into a book character mold? Because they don't know what a book character mold is necessarily supposed to look like from a creation perspective. They might know what a book character mold looks like from the finished book perspective, but there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes that most people never see. I'd probably be able to ask my wife about her her tabletop role-playing game characters. But to be fair, she's seen every single stage of the behind the scenes of me personally writing books. She knows every single piece of that puzzle already, fairly intimately, because she's seen me do it 6 times. And more than that, because I am currently writing books. So she's seen me do it more than 6 times. She's seen me go from idea to fully published book 6 times over, and also seen me write hundreds of short stories and seen me write tens of other drafts of books and come up with characters and delete them and change them and build new characters on the ashes of these old characters. And she's seen the character creation process that I do personally and the difference that I make personally between a tabletop role-playing game character who is largely affected by what the parameters of the tabletop role-playing game in question are, and a book character who is completely my own creation, right? I'm not beholden to anything when I create a book character, whereas when I create a tabletop role-playing game character, obviously they have to fit in the mold of a tabletop role-playing game character. They have stats and blocks and stuff that they have to be able to do in a way that a book character really doesn't have that guideline. It's a different skill set is what I'm saying. And and at the same time, I feel like I've been talking forever and I'm sorry because I'm about to go off on a very, very delightful tangent. At the same time, I do think that playing tabletop games can make you a better author. I've talked about whether short stories can do it, I think. Have I talked about that? I hope I have. I'm pretty sure I have, but I'm not 100% certain. So I'm just going to say that I have, and we're all going to pretend. But when it comes down to it, I've talked about how short stories can make you a better author. I've talked about how fan fiction can make you a better series author, because what is fan fiction? What is a sequel if not fan fiction of the original? And I know it's not as simple as that. I did make a whole nuanced video about it, but I do think that tabletop role-playing games can make you a better author. I think that the storytelling capacity in it can help you build your skill set, either your character creation skill set, or your world building skill set, or your internal character logic skill set, or you might have a better handle on pacing because of the way that a tabletop role-playing game by its very nature can seem to drag sometimes. We played a session the other day that was we played for 3 hours and it was just battle. There was nothing else. We stepped out of a portal, we fell into a battle, and then 3 hours later we had killed the dragon, we were all tired, everybody fell asleep, and also us as players were right, so when can we three meet again? Except there's 6 of us. But to be fair, it's 3 households, so it does still work. And obviously combat is what it is, and there's a lot of rolling and a lot of maths, and it does take a long time. I'm not saying anyone's doing anything wrong because combat took 3 hours we took 3 hours to kill this dragon. There are 5 characters and there was a dragon. That's 6 pieces of a combat puzzle happening in this situation. And I think that it again, it is what it is, but ultimately if you were trying to write a book of that, I don't think you would spend 3 hours writing this particular battle. So it can give you better pacing skills, because when you can see what feels like it's potentially dragging or what feels like it's going a little too fast, maybe by the very nature of playing a game in a cooperative state with several other people, you might have a better handle on pacing, or it might not help you in any of these ways at all. I'm not saying tabletop role-playing games can absolutely will, guaranteed, stamp, make you a better author. I'm saying it can make you a better author. I'm saying that I still think that exploring different mediums can always make you a better author. I think that writing short stories can make you a better author because it helps you build scenes better. Because what is a scene if not a short story? And I think fan fiction can make you a better novelist because what is a sequel if not fan fiction? And I think that poetry can make you a better author because what is aesthetically pleasing prose if not poetry? And I think tabletop role-playing games can make you a better author because what is tabletop role-playing player charactering other than building character, and what is tabletop GMing other than building worlds? And I think that playing video games can make you a better novelist. Watching movies, watching TV shows, reading books, any interaction with storytelling ever can give you author skills, can make you better at being an author. And at the same time, the best way to become a better author of books is to try writing books, right? So fundamentally, at its bare bones, can you write a novel out of your tabletop role-playing game campaign? The answer is, yeah, you absolutely can. Have a lot of fun trying. But it's not going to be easy. And if you can watch Gamers Darkness Rising, you absolutely should. It's a great time. It's a fun time. Please watch it. I like it. I'm not like in any way affiliated with them. I just really enjoy it, and I think that other people will probably enjoy it too. I watched it first when I was a teenager, and that was what got me into the idea of playing tabletop role-playing games in the first place. I think the beauty that Gamers Darkness Rising does as well is that it plays it on two different levels. Like Gamers Darkness Rising has these two parallel narratives, and the narrative is real world narrative. Kevin is trying to write a book, falling in love, running a game shop, and the actual campaign itself as a narrative. So these two narratives work really nicely in parallel with one another, and they are influenced by each other as well. And I think it's a really great time. So like, again, this is something I suppose you could potentially do if you don't mind turning your friends into book characters, which I personally am not comfortable with the idea of doing. I love my friends, and I feel like that would be weird. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. Lots of people write stuff that's really inspired by the people around them. And it's like, I've never done that. I say I've based characters on my friends, but what I actually mean is I have stolen my friends' names, mangled them a bit, and thrown them onto characters. And 9 times out of 10, that character is a villain, except for one very particular case with the Not That Kind of Dandy series, my pirate series, where one of the Navy guys that gets kidnapped is named after my friends because they got married when I was putting the final pieces in place for this book. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to name one of these characters. I'm going to change one of these characters' names to be named after them. And originally I was going to do it to one of the mean ones, and I thought actually that might be a bit harsh because they've just got married and it might make them feel unhappy. So instead I made it a different guy. And he survives. So it's pretty much all he's got for him is he gets really badly injured and then he survives. Probably. No, he does. He survives. And that's that. But I don't tend to base people in my books off of real people that I actually know, because I don't think that's fair or reasonable for me personally. I'm not saying nobody should do this. I'm saying, hey, I'm not comfy with that. I'm not going to do it. So yeah. That's my opinion on this concept of a question that I asked myself. And I would be super excited if you guys want to share in the comments or anything what you think. Whether you think that I'm right, because you should know. Whether you think that I'm right, whether you have a difference of opinion, whether you've ever written or read a book that is actually based on somebody's tabletop role-playing game. Because I'm interested, and I think it's cool. I do think that there is a lot of benefit, again, to looking at tabletop role-playing game characters, because a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, most of the time, these character building guides for tabletop role-playing games are designed to build really well balanced characters so that everybody at the table is on about the same level, and so that everybody on the table can do the same kinds of level of things, right? and can do things that are appropriate to their experience and do things that are appropriate to their... I'm going to keep saying level, aren't I? And I think that if you're struggling with character building, those kinds of guides can be really useful because it gives you a lot of, well, guidance for something that maybe is something you're struggling with. Or like, again, building worlds, you can use like game master guidelines for how to build a world, or how to build a combat encounter, or how to build NPCs, or how to build big bads, or whatever. Because these are things that are skills that you need to learn. And a lot of the time when people give writing advice, it's not about these things. It's about like the writing or overarching plot lines, and not the like nitty gritty of character and world building. And I mean, I'm not saying that nobody ever talks about character and world building in novels, but these tabletop role-playing game guides have like the whole point of a character building guide in a tabletop role-playing game is entirely to help you build a character. Whereas a lot of the time when people talk about building characters for narratives, they end up talking a lot about narrative more than building a character. And it's not quite so regimented and set out. And obviously, you don't have to do it that way. I do not build regimented set out characters. I mean, I don't even really do that in tabletop role-playing games. Like I said, I play a lot of like half-orc bard, half-orc cleric, tabaxi bard. Oh gosh, what was changeling something? What was Ellis? Ellis was a changeling something. Posing as a half drow elf, but had absolutely no dark vision. So there was a lot of fun to be had there. That was the one where my wife was a halfling bard with a human-sized tuba that she called her honk horn. We love Kalana. Absolutely adore Kalana. And yeah, if you want to check out my short stories with my D&D characters, because I play D&D, tabletop role-playing game characters, they are all available completely free on nopoodles.wordpress.com. I have a specific drop-down menu that can take you to the tabletop role-playing game characters. If you click on the writing menu, it's in the drop-down there. Or you can, read any of my other short stories also, including, of course, all of my chapter ones of my books and short stories in my book universes as well, which also has its own drop-down menu, if that's something that you're interested in. And of course, you can buy my books online. They are available from most places the books are sold, including the one that's named after a forest and a river. But you can also buy them signed copies direct from me, either at live events. Best way to keep up with where I'm going and when is either on my mailing list or on my Instagram or Tumblr. Or you can buy them online from my online shop, which again is always linked in the description box below. Or if you can't find the link you're looking for, you can go to my website and find everything that way instead. That's everything. I've forgotten how I sign off my YouTube videos. Bye!